Hello, and welcome to the Andreas Theater. As a courtesy to performers and other patrons, please take this time now to turn off or silence your cell phones. We hope you enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the author of Nocturne, the Sun.
15 years ago, I killed my sister. Then, I said it. I can change the order of the words. My sister, I killed 15 years ago. I, 15 years ago, killed my sister. Sister, my, killed I, years ago, 15. I can cite various definitions. To deprive of life, the farmer killed the rabid dog. To put an end to, the umpire killed the tennis match. To mark for omission, he killed the paragraph. To destroy the vital essential quality of, the dentist killed the nerve with Novocaine. To cause to stop, the bus driver killed the engine. To cause extreme pain to, his monologue killed the audience. To slay, to murder, to assassinate, to dispatch, to execute. You can play with tenses. Will kill, did kill, have killed, will have killed, would like to have killed. You can turn it into a gerund, killing. There's a kind of progress with the gerund. If you conjugate it in the past tense, it's all the same. I killed, you killed. He, she, it killed. They killed. You all killed. We killed. There's no way around it. 15 years ago, I killed my sister. It's dumb sounding, the way most facts are. Like a former president, or the names of bones. Grover Cleveland. Fibula, tibia, femur. There's a finality in a fact. There's something medical, almost. A fact is crafted, vaguely industrial. It has a permanence. Like a stain or a smudge. Like a botch or a spot or a blemish. A fact is a flaw. It's made of wood and left to fossilize, to gather minerals and geologically imprint itself on the side of a mountain. You can look at the back of your hand and know exactly how the bones move. The piano doesn't sing. It sobs. It aches without release, like a word that can't wrench itself from the throat, an alkaline trapped in the liver. Even a single note, a C sharp, the death of a small bird. An F, a stranded car's horn bleeding for help on the side of a highway. The piano has a permanence, a factual permanence. You can walk into a room and there it is in all of its stoic grandeur. It has an omnipotence. It waits for you without pursuit. Its hulking, coffin-like stillness. The way it comes to know your touch, like a lover's private indulgence, a kind of glacial intimacy, a cold, sexless knowing. Grieg, Chopin, and Tchaikovsky. There's a kind of death with a piano, the final note falling. Perhaps it's the inevitable ensuing silence, the deafening return to stillness. The instrument itself is a homicide waiting to happen, its physical weight, its gravity which seems to slow you, this seeming need it has to render you inert, to turn you into its motionless companion, as though it doesn't want to be played, as though this potential, that crushing unheard music, as though this absence alone is itself a kind of motion deterrent. The final movement in a sonata, an almost human tragedy, slow, brutal heart failure, coronary thrombosis. The weaving voices interloping in a fugue, a political death, a kind of vocal assassination. "15 years ago, I killed my sister. I was 17, she was 9. A fact. Now I'm 32, she would be 24. Fact. The hip bone's connected to the leg bone. The 69 Buick Electra 225 is a very lengthy car. There's something almost illegal about the expanse of its back end. From grille to tail light, it's 16 feet 9 inches. It has a 440 engine, and when you accelerate, you can feel the horsepower buzzing in your ribcage. It's like a car out of a comic book. At my father's insistence, I buy the Electra from Bob Ranzini, our family's insurance broker, for $250. Mr. Ranzini pats me on the back. He brags of its classic American pedigree. He speaks of its great sluicing hum and his yearly drive down to Jupiter, Florida, and all the old two-lane highways in the South. Sitting in the Electra is like lounging. There's a sense that platters of food will be served. The seats buzz back, the windows buzz down. An infinite buzzing, like the invisible drone of bees at work. Locusts in the fruit trees. A car humming with electricity. The accident happens like this. Joliet, Illinois. I'm coming home from Sub Diggity, my summer sandwich making job. I'm 17. I'm just off work. My clothes smell like roast beef and mayonnaise. My fingers are stained with mustard. Steely Dan's Hey 19 is playing on the AM. Way back when, in 67, I was the dandy of Gamma Chi. I'm traveling west on Black Road. There is no wind, and the air is so hot that it folds in through the window like an invisible quilt. It slouches in the passenger seat. After being on my feet for 8 hours, I'm not exactly in my body. I'm somewhere else. Somewhere near the music. Under the words. This bass line's all liquid velvet. It's a cool, creamy liqueur, this bass line. It's the second week in July. It's 95 degrees outside. The mosquitoes are plotting their midsummer feast. The moths hang under the gas station sign in a great epileptic nimbus. There's an endless feeling of Little League being played, nocturnally and with infinite concessions. Slurpees and caramel corn, blue snow cones staining the chins of toddlers, hot dogs that are so good they can feed entire families, an ocean of Little League diamonds. An aluminum bat hitting a ball is one of the greatest notes of July. A D, I think. A split-second song, a little chink of hope. I turn south onto Gale Drive. Sweet things from Boston, so young and willing. Move down to Scarsdale, where the hell am I? I'm going 45 in a 30. At least that's where the speedometer freezes after the collision. I like to call it a collision because decapitation sounds somehow capital, corporeal. We've lived on Gale Drive for most of my life. My mother, Jan, my father, Earl, and my little sister and I. It's a 3-bedroom ranch house with blonde brick. We have a garage and a sprinkler system. We have a birdhouse. We have dragonflies that hover and dart like miniature helicopters. We have bees. We have a small bearded gnome that looks like he's suffering from some sort of gastrointestinal disorder. In the front yard, there's a sycamore tree that bleeds. Its shadow hangs over my bedroom window like an enormous man trembling. Inside the house, there is infinite formica. Bookshelves and cupboards and countertops, tables and sideboards, desks, dressers, headboards all around, a credenza. There is so much formica, it's as if it was archaeologically excavated and the house was built around it to honor its laminated magnificence. I sometimes think the color of my skin is not white, but formica. In the living room, there is a 1942 Steinway piano. There is not a scratch on it. It is my father's prized possession. It was his father's, Grandpa Earl, and it was handed down with the understanding that it was only to be played if the hands that traveled along its ivory cusps were worthy of its glory. My father would spend hundreds of dollars having it tuned every spring. In our blonde house, the Steinway is so black that it sometimes has an air of war, as though it could be mounted, fired up, and driven right through the sheetrock. My mother places doilies on its hood, and family pictures on the doilies. My dad holding a rather bored-looking bass. My sister in a pair of roller skates that make her prepubescent legs look long and coltish. My parents clutching each other at the altar, looking as though they're about to enter a meat locker. An 8x10 7th grade photo of me, snaggle-toothed, my hair trying to levitate in one very large and rollicking cowlick. I would play that Steinway from the ages of 10 to 17. I would practice for 3 hours a day, and I would play until my hands would grow long and slender like a woman's. Eventually, I'd start walking around hunched and knotted like a Transylvanian harpsichordist. My parents would enter me into local competitions where mothers and fathers execute a cold Machiavellian reticence, sitting together not as husbands and wives, but as co-conspirators, not as lovers, but as collaborators in the industry of manufacturing perfection. Hands poised on knees, backs arched, necks stiff with righteous perpendicularity. Some stand incredibly still as though their severity will somehow conjure the perfect note. Some kneel in strange, sustained genuflection. Some position themselves in the aisles, arms akimbo. A posture of gentle warfare. These parents are agents and coaches and tutors and mentors and managers all rolled into one. They are priest and jailer. They are savior and executioner. Investor. They lock you into practice rooms and surreptitiously record your third crack at greed. They keep time with a pencil better than your teacher. They drill you and hug you and make you manicure your nails to the point of cuticle supremacy. It is an uncompromising, willful training. Over time, a horse owner rears his prize colt from foal to derby winner with a subtle, sustained use of his riding crop. I would win some of the small competitions. I would lose all the big ones. So it's 7:30. The sun is a flaming orb on the horizon. There are colors in the sky. Reds, pinks, burnt oranges. Clouds like frayed gauze, their underbellies golden somehow. Steely Dan is well into its chorus. The Cuervo gold, the fine Colombian, make tonight a wonderful day. Say it again. I turn north onto Gale Drive, and I decide not to go home. There's a place where I'll sometimes go and think. An enormous platoon of power lines that buzz with an indifferent somnolence. The radio trees. Some people go to the bars, others to the quarry. Some go to a restaurant on the east side where women in lingerie will dance on your table. I go to the radio trees. I want to take off my shoes and feel the buzz in my feet. I accelerate. Something small runs out into the road. I brake. Nothing happens. It's a dog, a garbage can, a plastic bag that's stolen a bit of breeze. I pump the brakes. I might as well be pumping a bologna sandwich. I swerve. There's a thud, a hollow wooden thud, small as an egg. I continue braking. Nothing happens. Steely Dan turns into the Alan Parsons Project. I am the eye in the sky. I keep braking, and the electric just keeps on going as though of its own volition. I swerve. I counter-swerve, and I crash into a large oak tree at the end of the street. The front end of the Electra, accordions to the windshield. There are birds everywhere. A schizophrenic cloud of crows. I crack 3 ribs and break my nose. I can taste the metal in my blood, like warm pewter. The speedometer sticks at 45 miles per hour. In that strange post-crash ethereal silence, I walk the 100 yards or so back to where I heard the thud. The crows have formed a kind of wavering anvil in the sky, and they are flying south towards the sound of the highway. It feels as though the steering wheel has been inserted into my ribcage. My legs take me. The hip bone is connected to the leg bone. My sister's body lies in the street. It looks like a doll's body. Legs, feet, yellow socks perfectly folded, bits of lace turned down, my mother's touch. Shoes so small, it's as if they were born out of a children's fable. Hands, arms, neck. A small white dress with little blue flowers, anemones, buttercups. Her head is across the street. It is rolled into the Petersons' driveway. I go over and pick it up, simply, perfunctorily, only a feeling of great clarity and absence, like a sudden gust of lake wind, as if it's a ball or some kind of fugitive picnic toy. Its weight seems tremendous. I will reattach it to the neck, and she will rise off the pavement, and she'll go back inside, and she'll wash up for supper. As I'm reattaching, my mother can be seen framed in the living room window, her hand pressed on the glass, her head tilted slightly, as though she is peering out over a strange body of water, as though she is peering and watching something hellish emerging from the fog. The sound of sirens, shrieking sirens in all directions. The shrieking turns into a kind of weeping. Sirens weeping in an octave only known to whales and dolphins. I can't remember my sister's face. Other parts of her are as definite as forks and knives. Her little blonde knees, her legs so slender you wonder how they could support the weight of even the smallest torso. Her wrists as thin as popsicle sticks. Her boyish arms, mosquito-bitten and stained with iodine and calamine lotion. Her tiny hands, her fingers as light and delicate as bird bones. The moons in her fingernails, their infinitesimal hemispheres, some setting into the bed of the cuticle, others rising as though coaxed by some kind of centrifugal song. I can sometimes see her ears, unusually large ears for such a small girl, lobes that dangle like tears of putty, the ears of a barber or a train conductor, an odd manly wisdom in those ears. I try and reconstruct the images. In that strange filmic method of the memory, I use still frames. I break it down into the celluloid. But before the storyboard, there's the mood, the intangibles, the acceleration of the electra, a vague feeling of satisfaction wending through my intestines, the radio trees calling to me, the steering wheel smelling of cold cuts, Steely Dan, the feeling of levitation as though the tires are only on the road due to the constraints of physics, the heat curdling in the front seat, radiating from the vinyl dash like a boiled medicine shirt that is drawn to the skin, and then that flash! And all those kaleidoscopic possibilities. Frame 1. A dog, King, the Peterson's German Shepherd. Frame 2, a bird, a spooked swallow swooping in from some unknown eaves, nose diving into the grill at the threat of rain. Frame 3, a garbage can, green somehow for recycling, and plastic because there's no music in the thud. Frame 4, a miskicked football hurtling end over end from the Doherty's backyard. And then frame 5, my sister in her white dress. So clean it's as if she's been bathed in preparation for her portrait to be painted. Her little knees, the slight duck-like pronation of her feet, duckling-like, I should say. Her Mary Janes and the yellow socks with the bits of lace. Her white dress with the blue flowers, with the quality of white Romans somehow. The flowers so blue it's as if they're singing. Her hand rising up theatrically. Stop! Please stop. Not now. Not like this. I'm too small for this to happen. Sure, I'll play with the drama. I'll tweak it. I'll raise and I'll lower her hand. Palm out. Index finger extended towards the windshield accusatorily. I'll add and remove inflection. I see it as text. I italicize, I bold. I underscore to drive it home. I'll fold in shrieks and boogeyman screams and even tears. Yeah, tears, as if she even had enough time to well up. I've even plummeted to the depths of comedy. She'll wink at me. She'll have a handlebar mustache. She'll be holding a deck of cards, peel off the joker, frame it with her hand, and then fling it towards the windshield with ironic magician-like skill. She'll snicker and sneer. She'll pull out a saddle horn and honk it with great velocity. She'll chortle and flim-flam and rabble-rouse. She'll lift up her dress to reveal a very loud set of rainbow suspenders. But no matter how I try and reconstruct the instant of impact, the only thing that endures is an overwhelming blankness, a blip of nothing. Zero. As if the sound, that hollow thud, as if it were a product of some neighborhood ventriloquism, as though the asphalt itself was in vaudevillian cahoots with the Hardins or the Petersons. She swam. She rode her bike. While I practiced a conservatory audition, she sat under the piano bench and crayoned pictures of clowns with balloons in their cheeks. She liked wearing boys' clothes. She'd steal my boxer shorts and wear them to swimming practice. Once, at dinner, she ambitiously announced her plan of owning a tuxedo. She intended to wear it at her 4th grade graduation. My mother, of course, made her wear dresses and pierced her ears. She would propose marriage to me at least once a week. She'd go to a knee and she'd say, "Marry me, you big, juicy hunk of yummy boy steak." I'm not kidding, she'd actually say that. And then she'd laugh, and I'd laugh, and the chorus of our laughter was like a jet flying through our blonde house. She imitated dogs. She'd get down on all fours and howl at the siren of a distant fire truck. She would mime a spell of rather lengthy canine urination into the nook of the sofa. She'd mark her territory in virtually all corners of the house. She called me Dorcas. Once, she pasted together 37 of my baseball cards and stuck them under my pillow. I was furious. So, the memories are all there, as clear as if they happened yesterday. I just can't see her face. Sometimes I'll actually picture 2 enormous X's stamped over her eyes. Something from the Sunday's comics. I'll change her hair color on a daily basis. She was a rhubarb blonde. No. She wasn't. She was a redhead, and she had tortellini-like curls. She had straight brown hair. She was bald, and her skull gleamed with a kind of lunar sorrow. Sometimes I wonder if she wanted to be hit. She wasn't chasing a ball or a kite. There weren't any kids calling to her from the other side of Gale Drive. She wasn't pushed from behind. No 30-mile-an-hour winds. Not a single tornado reported within 100 miles that day. From our driveway, approaching cars can be seen at least 50 yards away. No, she wasn't abused. She wasn't ridiculed. She was hardly, if ever, sent to her room. She was fed, and she was loved, and she was well clothed. She was the first girl on her swimming team to do the butterfly. In jacks, she was good up to 6s. Her hands were quicker than mine ever were on the fastest arpeggios. She tried to read Stephen King novels. She was curious. My mother had to take The Shining away from her 3 times. A faceless child walks in front of a speeding car. I could buy that. A man with 3 kids and a beautiful wife leaps from the 30th floor of his Wall Street building. A pregnant woman walks off the Verrazano Bridge, and everyone says she was so happy. Hemingway sticks a rifle in his mouth. Jerzy Kaczynski asphyxiates himself with a plastic bag and floats to his death in the bathtub. Even in literature, Anna Karenina jumps in front of a train. Lily Bart does it with chloroform. But you never hear about it with children. It's always an accident. Trains and buses, parking lots at supermarkets, that one slippery ledge at the quarry. Tragedy's poker. God's ugly deck of cards. Perhaps there is a kind of death wish in some children. They see the grim vision from the window of their school bus. The 2-car garages, the gabled roofs, and the manicured lawns, and the sedans just sitting there like enormous, uninspired termites. They think, I don't want that. I don't want to be an adult. I don't want to hide behind the drapes and darn my husband's socks and have my senses deadened by the freon-cooled whir of central air. I don't want my belly to distend with multiple pregnancies or feel the disease of tumors or the sediment of red meat. I don't want this stifling suburban affliction. I don't even want pubic hair. I just want to swim and run and spin. I want to get away with things. I want to eat snow cones for the rest of my life. I like my little blonde knees, thank you very much, and I have a right to keep them little and blonde. So I'll end it while it's still going good. And I'll make it quick, too. I'll walk out in front of a speeding car. It'll be just like walking to the edge of a high dive. And I'll even take a bath and throw on my favorite dress first. The evening of my sister's death, it was discovered that the brake line on the Electra had snapped. I'm in the hospital. I'm floating through a cumulonimbus ether of some narcotic analgesic when my mother walks, or rather glides in the room like a cigar store Indian on casters. I would say Jan is, and always has been, a handsome woman. You read about handsome women in novels. I always envision Abraham Lincoln in an evening gown. Faulkner's women outliving the South as though they were born in the boughs of cottonwoods. You get the sense that when they reach the end of their lives, they don't die, but rather affect a kind of graceful expiration. A return to the woods where their bones don't dwindle to dust, but take roots in the ground and braid in with the great hairy trees of the Delta. Even the beautiful Charlotte from the Wild Palms, the blue-collar artist, always wearing men's pants, her beautiful yellow eyes. Steinbeck's depression-thickened matriarchs, all those journeying Joad women, their bare feet as tough as canvas shoes, the young ones round-shouldered and prematurely varicosed from the labor of farming. Jan could have been a Joad. It's not that my mother doesn't indulge in the wearing of makeup or the Arctic-like frosting of her hair. She owns enough beauty products to slather down an entire police force. It's the chin, the brow, the strong, squarish chin, something wooden and angular, as though its structural strength is not from a quality found in the marrow of her cheekbones, but rather like a hard, metallic property detected in something old and ossified, a condition like rust or fossilization, something that is perhaps present in floorboards that have been around since the Civil War. It's a thing beyond her German ancestry. So, my handsome mother enters the room, her hair so shellacked with sprays and balms and mousses that it looks like a kind of gentle furniture on her head. Face hardened with grief. Makeup so severe, it's as if she was forced to apply it at knife point. She sits in a chair beside my bed for a long time before she speaks. I look down and see that her hands are clenched into fists. Her nylon running suit crackles periodically like fire. After a long medical silence, she tells me about the brake lines. She says,
It was the brake line.
a nurse comes in and checks something on my chart. She exits without a greeting or a goodbye. My mother says,
They're going to let you off with involuntary manslaughter.
the word man, the word slaughter. She says,
only thing you are guilty of is failure to stop, to avoid an accident.
She almost sounds disappointed. A long, slow-motion gurney passes by my room. Despite its expanse of chrome and the spidering lines and the chutes and the tubes and its accompanying intravenous splatter that looks like a crystal kidney proudly plucked and mounted in glorious surgical crucifixion, the whole thing, with all of its gleaming prophylactic paraphernalia, is as noiseless as a twig floating in a river. A patient in transit is missing her chin.
A $50 fine. Your father paid it for you.
I say, tell him thanks, she says.
He's taking it very hard.
In my room, there's a picture of a little clown with balloons in her cheeks. A child clown holding an enormous vulturous umbrella. It looks like something that my sister could have crayoned under the piano bench. I think it is a cruel joke. Somehow, hospitals are designed to terrorize you with benign, affectless contempt. In their cold, fluorescent indifference, recovery always carries with it a kind of haunting. Incontinence, post-surgery hypothermia, the lung collapse of the body slowly weaning itself from the anesthesia. A picture of a small clown with balloons in her cheeks. I say, how are you, Mother? She doesn't respond. Her eyes are screaming to blink. The dehydrated whites broiled to a dull pink. They look like they'd be hot if you tried to touch them. I'm sorry, Mother.
It wasn't your fault.
I say, I know, but still. And then she says it again.
Father is taking it pretty hard.
I say, of course.
But we'll get through this.
We are silent for a while. And when I try to move, it feels like there is crushed glass in my lungs. In that moment, my mother reaches her hand up. I think she's going to place it on my forehead or my cheek. But she halts. Her hand is suspended there, as if she is hailing a taxi, as if there's a sheet of boiling glass between us. She eventually lowers her hand, and it turns back into a fist in her lap.
Rest well.
And then she gets up and walks out. The abrasion of her nylon running suit can be heard suspiring down the corridor in a small, hot whisper. That would be the last thing my mother would say to me. Rest well. A month after the accident, my mother would move out of our little blonde house on Gale Drive and into an apartment with her sister. She would live for 3 years with my aunt, until one day, nearly 8 years after having transplanted to New York, ironically the day I land the contract for my first novel, I receive a letter from her sister saying that my mother has been moved to a private boarding residence for the clinically depressed. I would later learn of her daily diet of 100 milligrams of Haldol, and the bench where she spent her afternoons is incessantly singing Old MacDonald's Farm, and that her favorite pastime is the making of potholders. That endless looping and weaving. My father takes the death of my sister pretty hard. Earl is, or should I say was, the superintendent at the local junior high, Mongie Junior High. My third day back from the hospital, he calls me into his study. I'm not yet walking too well. There's still that crushed glass to deal with every step. We've passed each other in the kitchen, the way canoes pass in a lake, with a silent, dumb inevitability. But we haven't spoken since I've been home. I hover at the entrance of the study, leaning against the door jamb. He can't look at me. When he speaks, it's with a kind of detached analog. His grief has turned him into a robot. He is Earl the automaton. He says,
"Come in, son."
I've lost my name. I've turned into that anonymous, boyish pronoun used by policemen and coaches. Son. Which basically means non-son. I feel like he's going to make me clap erasers after school. He's going to give me an hour of detention. I enter his study. It's as clean as a church. His computer issuing forth a vague blue light, the hard drive dog whistling subliminally. Encyclopedia Britannica filling the first shelf of his bookcase with all of its vertical propriety. Awards from the school district framed along the back wall. A small mariner's clock clipping time. I sit across from him at his hulking oak banker's desk. His hands are flat on the blotter, his head tilted down almost shamefully. There is a small, snub-nosed revolver set between the axes of his thumbs. It looks like a young blackbird sleeping. I have never seen this gun before. I had no idea there was a small black gun living in our small blonde house. But when he finally looks up, his eyes are as wide as goose eggs. I say, "Is that a gun?" He doesn't respond. Instead, he kind of clucks as though his Adam's apple has turned into a peach stone, and all the future swallows will be accompanied by this hollow wooden sound effect. I say, "Dad, is that a gun?" You can feel the heat of the room curling between your eyelashes. "Dad!" The gun is clutched between his hands now, its nose pointed at my head. The hole looks like a little iron nostril. I'm exhausted. My ribs ache. To tell you the truth, I actually don't care very much. His fury has a smell, like cold, undercooked pork. With a slow, deliberate lean, the gun gets closer and closer, as if it is suddenly animated autogenuously, and the science fiction of it all is leading his hands forward. I'm thinking, "No, Dad! Please, no!" But nothing comes out.
Don't move.
He says, "Don't move," as if there's a wasp crawling on my shoulder. The gun is in my mouth now. its cylinder forcing my lips apart, like kissing the engine of a toy train. It smells of axle grease. Its weight is incredible on my teeth. It tastes cold and dumb and molecular. He seethes. His breath is hot and his skin a flat, dull pink, and I don't recognize myself in him. I see nothing of his only son in the strange, violent intimacy. The wide nose, the small rectangular scar below his bottom lip, the far spread eyes, the flesh under his chin forming a kind of fatty trestle at the top of his neck, his hair not graying but turning a kind of womanish chemical yellow. For some reason, I have this thought that I am from a stork. I was birthed on a mountainside, flown to the suburbs by a mythological fowl, and dropped in the mouth of a chimney. I hear my mother's voice.
Earl. Put the gun down, Earl.
Her voice is gentle, with fatigue,
Not this way, honey.
as if she is coaxing a child out of a tree. Not this way, honey. What does that mean? He clucks again. And with this cluck, I realize that his fury is not about the death of my sister, but rather that her death is a kind of flashpoint in the half-life of his dwindling vapor of sanity. The spark that has lit a crucible. The final crack in his undamming river of disappointments. And then there's my mother. The even, priest-like register of her voice. Her fat arms. The one knee that sticks. The subtle hump in her back that has emerged like a swollen, tumorous parasite trying to escape the cold prison of her flesh. This utilitarian convenience that was once a marriage, with passion or heat or a strand of lust to allow their bodies to mingle in what was to be two acts of procreation. Their strange, sexless husbandry. His low-ceilinged career. The mortgage payments. The broke-down cars and abortive kitchen gadgets. Toasters and can openers and crock pots. The small wood shop in the garage that would never be built. The cosmetic smell of spackling correcting the sheetrock. Yards and yards of sheetrock. Miles of blank white walls and their failed promise. The birdless birdhouse. The tree in the front yard always bleeding with its white milky cancer. The predictable, humid Joliet summers. The snow-heaped winters whose windshield is a kind of biblical rectification. The rectory silence of dinner. Broken only by the sound of the TV or the clink of utensils on plates or the sob of a hated piano. Play for us, son. Play while your mother clears the table. He would eventually remove the gun from my mouth. My mother would take it and drop it in the trash, somehow rendering the thing powerless. The taste of it still haunts me. It sickens me. You can suck on a penny and get pretty close. I would eventually lift off the chair and walk out of our little blonde house on Gale Drive. I'm exhausted. My ribs inflamed. I would lurch, slouch, spiral to the bus stop, my body moving with a kind of thoughtless locomotion, as if it were some imperfect homemade ratchet wrench. The bus would take me to the train station. I'd take Amtrak as far east as it will go. After having slept next to an enormous cutlery salesman from Teaneck, New Jersey, I would arrive in New York City the following morning in a kind of severe, tightly coiled body clench. Grand Central Station. Commuters and merchants and runaways colliding in a kind of electron bombardment. A cathedral with noise. So many suits. Anonymity. Here, I would begin my 15-year disappearance from the town with the little blonde house on Gale Drive. I would step out onto 42nd Street with $12.42 in my pocket. The hip bone is connected to the leg bone.